Hi everyone, hope you're well. So, came across a piece earlier. I didn't read it, so I'm not going to do the usual thing whereby I read out an article. But it was more the discussion thread, and the story was basically about a businessman who'd been on a long haul flight, 29 hours. That's presumably a cumulative duration. Um, Honestly, it doesn't really matter. The principle here is that it's a long haul flight. So, the precise details are less important than the underlying issue here. And there was a crying baby the whole way. So this guy's calling for child-free flights. As you can imagine, this generated a very big, lively debate on the comment thread. Um, I've actually seen this sort of story before. A few years ago, there was a report that one of the Japanese airlines was going to have child-free flights. So, this is my take on it basically. I think that paying customers should have a choice. I think that it's very reasonable to expect that if you pay a lot of money for a flight, and long haul flights are not cheap, that you should have as stress free a journey as possible. That is getting from A to B, or A to B to C to D if there's connections. Making sure that your luggage isn't lost, that's a big thing. Having a comfortable flight. And part of having a comfortable flight is as little disruption as possible, meaning that hopefully the flight isn't late or delayed, and also that you don't have problems with fellow passengers. Um, Now, there seems to be two schools of thought here. I noticed in the responses. Some people were implying the businessman was selfish and he was lacking empathy for parents, traveling with young children. Um, the thing for me is it has to be the thing about empathy is it can work both ways because I take the view that if you having a child is a choice, if you bring a child into the world, that child is your responsibility. I think it is unreasonable to just demand that other people just accept it. This idea, and I'm talking here about young children as opposed to babies. I'll come back to that. But this idea that, oh, children will be children, just deal with it. Yeah, children will be children, but as an adult, as a parent, it's your responsibility to put some barriers on your children. It's totally unreasonable and, in my view, utterly entitled and selfish to just expect other people to put up with it. It's difficult for another person to have to do the job that you should be doing. I've never been in this situation myself, being on a flight with a really disruptive kid, but I was in a situation whereby I was waiting at, I'd missed my train at Paris Gare du Nord, um, and basically I had to wait in a waiting room all night. And I remember there was a family, and everyone was tired. That's what we were waiting there for the next early morning train. And I remember this kid kept coming up to me and just being really loud. And I was sort of looking over at the parents like, can you just, you know, can you sort of control them? Don't let your kid run around and bother strangers. And they were just totally oblivious to it. Now, I think that is very, very selfish. Having said that, I'm not without empathy for parents in this sort of situation. It can be, I imagine, very stressful having a young child and traveling as a young family. I do have enormous sympathy for people in that situation. I'm not a parent myself, but I know that my brother and sister-in-law, when their kids were younger, traveling is stressful. I could see that. I remember being on a long coach journey, and there was no, actually, it was a train journey, and there was a woman who had a young child, and I could tell she was under pressure, and she was apologizing to everyone. I had some spare tissues. I think the child had been sick, and I offered them. So it was rather than just being cranky. I thought, okay, well, I'll try and help her out a bit, and she was grateful for that. So I really do have sympathy with parents who are traveling with young children. I imagine it is not fun, and I think others should be somewhat sympathetic in that situation. But there is a difference between a baby who really is helpless, like A little baby really doesn't, they have no self-control. That's absolutely a helpless person. A toddler, however, is old enough to have some barriers. That is to say, if a 3 or 4 year old is, making a lot of noise, for example, banging their toy on the headrest of the person in front of them, it is within the power of the parent to do something about that. And if they do nothing, if their attitude is, oh, well, children will be children, and they expect the other person to just put up with it, that is extremely, I think that's obnoxious. Um, because a child is old enough to be told, no, don't do that. That's bad behavior. Um, Baby is different because a baby is a baby that really are helpless. Um, yeah, you could give them a dummy, but it doesn't always work. They may be teething, they may be in pain. So I am sympathetic to that, but I think on long haul flights, most long haul flights do provide like headphones and stuff like that, so there are ways to dull out the noise. But having the option for a child-free flight, I don't know why anyone would have a problem with it because people who do have young children, they're not being discriminated against. They can still take flights. It's just giving the option to others who don't want to spend 10 hours with a crying baby or child who's being disruptive. Um, so I really don't know why anyone would have a problem with giving people the option. I don't think you could say it's discriminating against children because they could still go on flights. It's just recognizing actually, some people maybe want to have peace. And I do think, I mean, I will weigh more on the side of giving people that choice. I will weigh more on the side of if you have children, they're your responsibility. And yes, sometimes it really cannot be helped, especially with babies. Young children, no, I think there are things that parents can do to control them. This attitude of children will be children is extremely selfish. It's the responsibility of adults to control their children. That's the reality. And expecting others to just put up with it. Why should someone who's paid for their ticket, why should they not be allowed to enjoy as peaceful a flight as possible? This idea, or they should just put up with it. What if they're doing an important business? What if they're going between business meetings? Or what if they've, come from a funeral, for example, and they just want peace? It's this idea. I saw some people coming up with, oh, they should just put up with it. Why? They have rights as consumers too. I think people should be understanding to young parents, but this is about mutual respect. And if your attitude is they should just put up with it, that's an extremely selfish attitude. Because you're the one that has chosen to bring a child into the world. You're the one that is traveling with children. And I know sometimes it's unavoidable because there may be no other way to travel if you're going, if you've relatives in another country or something. Personally, I don't think people should travel with very young children. If I were a parent, I wouldn't go on a long haul holiday until the children are old enough to appreciate. I don't think toddler would appreciate, unless it's maybe Disneyland or something. I really don't think a toddler would appreciate that sort of holiday anyway. So I'd probably have a domestic trip for that sort of. That's honestly how I would see it because anyway, this comes down to mutual respect, and I think there are some people who lack empathy with parents who maybe are a bit, they've I've seen them portrayed in films where they're sort of the the very pompous businessman, and it's kind of a bit of a trope. But what if that pompous businessman is actually doing essential work, and he's not actually a pompous businessman? What if he is trying to get some sort of transaction for their own children who may be in some sort of emergency situation? Who knows? You just don't know what someone else's situation is. So just assuming that everyone else can put up with it is unreasonable, I think. But the idea of child-free flight, give people a choice. I will say one more thing though, you know, because it would be wrong to say it's only children that can be badly behaved. Firstly, a lot of kids are good. It would be wrong to say all children are instinctively badly behaved. That's not true. Um, the other thing is some adults are absolutely appalling. I mean, if I have a choice between a crying baby and a drunk stag or hen party, I'd possibly choose the crying baby because drunk adults can be utterly obnoxious. There is nothing worse than a drunk person at 35,000 feet. I mean, I think that is absolutely appalling, because they're endangering the cabin crew, they're endangering other passengers, they're making it obnoxious, unpleasant for everyone. Um, Although that's more common on short haul flights, to be fair. But my take is basically, there has to be some mutual empathy. Yes, have empathy for parents who are in that situation, but parents should also consider that other passengers have no obligation to just put up with it. Um, a baby, yes. Young children, no. If your child is running up and down the aisle, if they're banging their toys on the headrest in front of them, it's your responsibility to say, no, don't do that. Sit down and be quiet. That's the responsibility of a parent. And I don't think that's unreasonable or draconian. I think it's just a question of respecting others. And in the Western world, I would say this is more a Western phenomenon. I do think there are a lot of entitled people out there. There is entitlement in Asian countries, but in a different way. It tends to be, there was a notorious incident a few years ago. I think it was either on a Korean air company or it was a Korean executive, but she absolutely berated the cabin crew and she ended up having to make a groveling apology. It was quite a well documented incident. So I'm under no illusions that some adults are just as bad, if not worse. And they've got fewer excuses because they're adults. They should, you know, that's just obnoxious. But ultimately, I don't think it's reasonable to just expect others to put up with it. There may be situations where there really is no choice. If a little baby is teething, that's babies cry. It's a reality. But young children, there's things that can be done there, and I don't think there's anything wrong. I don't know why anyone would have a problem with giving people a choice. It doesn't discriminate against families because they still have the choice to go on regular flights. It's simply giving people a choice, if they have to pay a little bit more or whatever that may be the option. But I think people should have the choice. If they know that they're going to have to do business on that flight, they should have the choice. Um, it's not unreasonable for others to expect a stress-free trip. And 29 hours, like I said, I didn't look at the details of that particular report, but we're not talking about a short haul flight there. 29 hours of a baby crying would be pretty hellish. Um, I don't think, in that situation, hopefully the flight provided earphones. I would imagine if it's a long haul flight, it would have, but even that may not have been enough to drown it out. So, like I say, young, babies can be teething, but I still think I've seen parents who literally do nothing. They don't even try. I think that is wrong. That is selfish. So let me know your thoughts. If you're a parent, I'd like to know your perspective because actually, this isn't a case of parents versus non-parents. I've seen plenty of parents saying, actually, I agree with that. People should be allowed a choice. So I don't think it's necessarily parents versus non-parents. It's just a question of mutual respect. But, when we talk about selfish entitlement, I think someone who just expects the rest of the world to put up with their situation, that's entitled. It's the definition of entitled. People should be understanding. So if you had someone sort of immediately, arguing with them, say, "Oh, shut up, that baby," or something, that would be unfair. But really, when it's been hours and hours, just saying, "Oh, just put up with it," that's utterly unreasonable. Or even what they could do, even if they didn't have specific flights, they could divide the flight up, have a family section or something. I don't know. Surely has to be some compromise because people are paying money. It's not unreasonable to expect it to be as stress free as possible. Is that really so much to ask for?